Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Courageous Pivot podcast, moving towards becoming the Courageous Life podcast, because that ultimately is what I've come to learn this process truly is. It's about asking the question, what does it mean to live a courageous life? And to answer it is where the pivots start to come in. If you have not yet, I want to ask you to head to courageouspivot.com and subscribe. Get on the list there so that you can access all the bonus materials we are pulling together for you. They are going to be available shortly if they're not already, but you have to be on the list to be able to access them. Today's guest is my friend Ashley Mills. She is the co-founder of Obey Fitness. If you've been following me for any length of time, you've probably heard me mention it now and again, or maybe sent an email about it. But I joined Obey Fitness back in 2019, and I have stuck with it now for 7 years. It has been both a life and fitness changer. Ashley started her career as a talent agent for CAA, moved into co-founding Obey Fitness, and about a year ago had her exit from the company, which did not go as she planned, or maybe because she hadn't planned it at all. But this is a story, and she tells her story about what happens afterwards. I think a lot of us, especially as entrepreneurs, have this vision of what can be from an exit, and it rarely cracks up the way we had hoped or anticipated. Ashley was bold and vulnerable and shared the challenges of that liminal stage. When you've kind of, checked the boxes and achieved those goals, what do you do next? She is the mother of 3 boys and a dog, so clearly is living a courageous life with that alone. And we get into the whole process of what it was to build out that company, raising funds through different types of investors, what that exit looked like, and where she's landed today as we caught up in this conversation. There's so much wisdom in here and so much honesty that I think is really, really important to fully understand. And I'm grateful that Ashley was so open to share it all. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello and welcome, Ashley Mills. I am so looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for being here.
And I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. It's lovely to see you. It's, you're a saint, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I've been on the receiving end of your gifts for now almost 7 years. You were on the top of my list when I started writing out guests I wanted to have. And then you delayed me, which is fine because all good things come to those who wait.
Yes.
And I'm really looking forward to chatting with you because I've having created my own online community and online world, being part of yours and what you created helped me see that kind of impact, like that what you created became part of almost every day of my life.
You're going to make me cry.
So I want to start. I mean, you're such a fascinating and brilliant human. I'd like to start with you as a kid. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, that's a great question. So my mom was a nurse, and and she was a single mom. My dad was in the military service, and he was abroad. He lived in Okinawa like much of my early life. And so when my mom was on call, she worked in the operating room. When she was on call, if she got called in, we'd have to go with her. And I remember very, very early on, and I think that this probably is against every kind of like OSHA policy that they have today, but I would go in surgery and watch her in surgery, at the table watching. And I loved A Baby Story. That was that TLC show, if you remember it. And
I remember it. And I love the dating story. I love the wedding story. I shut it off before the baby story came on. I was
funny.
Do not need to watch this.
You're I like that franchise. Yeah. So and then right now I'm watching The Pit season 2. So I've always loved all things medical, but obviously I did not become a doctor.
That's what you wanted to do when you were young? You wanted to be a doctor?
Yeah. But I also am dyslexic and math is challenging. So it never really panned out for me. I think those dreams they didn't go very far.
So what would you say was your first career? What was your first real grown up career job or role?
Yeah. So I was a talent agent at CAA. And
Okay.
so just to back up, I was in college, I was going to do consulting. I was an econ major and economic or international studies major. And I was going to do consulting. And I went through the whole, like, you have to do all these like case studies and whatever. And I remember the last one was on corrugated boxes, basically cardboard boxes. And I was like, I can't get excited about this. I'm too much of like a mission driven person. And so in my 21 years, of wisdom, I was thinking about like, what do I want to do if it's not this? And my mom and I always watched Oprah like every day at 3 o'clock. And I thought like, my very altruistic self was like, Oprah's had obviously the ability to affect so many women. And she certainly like taught me a lot about the world. And so that was sort of like my foray and sort of the conversation I had with myself that led me to the entertainment business. And yeah, I moved to LA right after college. And the first week there, I got a job as an assistant at CIA. Funny enough, the first job on the desk, so as the assistant, my boss, Tony Etz, asked me to connect him to Miss Winfrey's office. I had no idea at the time, but he was doing Oprah's Big Give Deal. If you remember that show on ABC, it was a like philanthropic giving show. And so
That wasn't the car situation.
no, that was on her show. That's you get a car. No, this was
Yeah.
like, we'll give you money to do, XYZ.
Okay.
And so anyway, it was short lived. I think it was on maybe for one season, but he was doing her deal. And that first week on the job was to talk about like the final deal points. And so first week on the job, I got to be on the photo with Miss Winfrey. And so I knew I was in the right place.
That's amazing. How long were you working as a talent agent?
I was at CA for 10 years. So the first couple of years I was an assistant and I went through like the training program. And in that world, you go through like this mailroom experience. It's really like an apprentice type model and you really learn from the ground up. And so, yeah, I did that for 10 years before I left and started Obey.
Okay, we're not at Obey yet,
Okay.
but we'll get to Obey.
Okay.
What was it that you learned was a key to look for in people?
In people, I think like in terms of who I would sign.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like you must have come across so many different personalities and qualities in humans.
Yeah. I would say, I think the people that I always gravitated towards were people who had like a message they had to share.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a message, and the way that they, thought about distilling it was like really simplified so that it could be well understood, no matter kind of like what your life experience, education level, et cetera. And, I think there's a magnetic quality sometimes to those people that have that kind of witchy, white witch sort of sensibility. And I think those are always the people that I was really drawn towards. And, other things like the humility was always super important. Obviously, so the agency that I work for, CA, it's the biggest in Hollywood. And there's sort of like two big competing ones, William Morris and CA. And I think that the standard of who CA signs is very, very high. And one of the things that was always really striking to me is the people that are the most powerful are the ones that have the most humility. And I think oftentimes when people are sort of like coming up, they think the inverse is true, and it's not. And so that was always always a big thing that I noticed. And especially, as you're coming up young in an agency, you're the trainee that's brought along and you're the whatever. And so it was always the people that were really nice to me and spoke to me as if I were, had 20 years in the business. Those are the people that ended up being the really successful ones and the ones that I always wanted to sign.
Were you casting for like film and entertainment, or was it more lifestyle?
So it was a lot.
Like
it was
real people.
Yeah, it was a lot of things. So the department that I worked in is the TV department, but specifically in non-scripted. So these were a lot of like experts who were on television. So it was like the Simon Cowells of the world, or, there would be like a music talent like Katy Perry who wanted to do a TV show, that kind of thing. And then that was one sect of it. And then there was also like, documentary filmmakers who created a documentary and then they wanted to make that into a TV show. So like an example of that would be like Catfish. So Neve Schulman and his producing partners, they made this documentary. It was wild. And we created it as a TV show for MTV. And then, separately from that, at the time, there were a lot of like these entertainment shows. So like E! News and Insider and blah, blah, blah. I would find like who are the voices there that we can put into those shows. And so sometimes they were making career transitions from doing one thing to doing this. And then others, they had loved sort of like hosting and got into it in a very just like host centric, this is what I'm going to do sort of way.
That's so interesting. I used to be the talent on a lifestyle show for nutrition. I did. I got fired after the first year. I also once applied.
What was the show?
It was a daytime lifestyle show in Canada.
Yeah.
Like it was nationwide. It was called the Marilyn Dennis Show.
Okay.
So she'd been big in morning and she got her own show. And then there was an open casting call and I went and I got it. And I didn't get on with my producer and didn't like what they wanted me to cook. And it was out of alignment. And it's like, I was like, if I'm going to create all these cooking segments, I'll create my own show.
Right.
And I'll just do it myself. I also once applied to be on The Bachelor.
Did you really? I love this.
2005.
Oh my God.
It was still only in the US.
Yeah.
I don't think they were even considering Canadians. I might have lied about my height because I noticed that all the women were really tall on that show.
Wow.
I didn't hear back.
Well, the fact that you knew that was the show to get on, that would like create, that would create like a groundswell and you would be able to build a following so that you could eventually create a community. That's a testament to you because those were the very early days.
Yes. I don't know that the following I was going to build through The Bachelor. Like, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing then. I was working in advertising. I was a little lost puppy. But anyway, what was the call that said, I'm going to now cast people for a fitness app, which is sort of what you pivoted to, is it not?
Yeah, it is. So what was the call? Meaning like what intuitively within
I mean, you left a successful career after 10 years to start for a startup, a tech and talent startup of a fitness app.
Yeah.
So how did that
transition happen? Yeah. So it's an interesting story. So I'd been there for 10 years. Obviously a lot of life happens sort of like in your 20s, going into your 30s. I had just had my first son and, having a job like that, which it's really a lifestyle job. When I say that, I don't mean it's like, relaxed and no pressure. It's more of you have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. You're on the road constantly. Stuff is happening on weekends. It's kind of, it could be pretty unpredictable. And so I found myself in a situation where I had this like beautiful baby boy at home and I just didn't know how I was going to like make that life work long term. And I knew that if I wanted to continue to excel in my career, I needed to do all of those things. And so, I don't know, I was in a place where I was like reevaluating and thinking about what like this next chapter had to unfold. And my very good friend, my really best friend at CA was Mark, my business partner, who you also know. And yeah, he had this idea of creating like a network for fitness. So think like MTV back in the day, like that's what, but like all fitness. And he had talked to people about it and he had wanted to do it. And he mentioned it to me. And I was at the point where I couldn't, fitness was always something that I did and I loved. So it's Soul Cycle or, whatever the classes were. And it got really hard, obviously, when I had my son. And so, I think that idea started to kind of like resonate with me. And at the same time, all of the SVOD platforms, so like the Hulus and OTTs, et cetera, they were blowing up. And that sounds like obvious today, but at the time it wasn't because we were really like selling to broadcasting cable. And at the same time, there was like all these people that were coming to me for CA clients who wanted to create like subscription services around an individual talent. So sort of like all these things that like came together at the same time and made me think like, okay, there's an opportunity to do a fitness network, but to do it on a digital platform. There's not a huge barrier to entry in terms of the tech and engineering because these platforms exist. And so I got really excited about
the
it.
idea, the idea wasn't like to create the Hulu or Netflix of fitness, or was that the idea? Like where you could go on and there was like all the different, were they workouts or were they shows about fitness?
Yeah. So it was always fitness classes. So it was, think of like, if you think I don't think Netflix of fitness is the right idea. I think the reason I mentioned that is because the mode of distribution and entertainment had changed. And that was like clear that was setting hold. And then the other piece of it is the technology in order to start one of these services was now available to a layperson like me who doesn't, know how to code. Though with Cloud Code, I'm getting pretty good. So so the idea was that it was that I like from a business perspective, that's what I was thinking about. But in terms of the actual experience that I wanted to create something that was immersive and fun and that would like help you get out of your head and into your body when you're exercising at home. My mom grew up, like when I grew up, my mom was doing Richard Simmons and Jane Fonda in the basement. So like I knew that that was possible. But what was different now is like you didn't need VHS tapes and do the same workout again and again with the same jokes and what have you. And you could do something that was like really that was fun and immersive and live. And so that's where sort of it all started. So we launched with 4 different types of fitness classes. So it was a sculpt class, dance cardio. So it was more of the like creative movement. And then on the more functional side, it was a circuit class for cardio and then a strength class. And so, yeah, those were the earliest days. And then over time, we certainly expanded into, I think Obey now has like 20 plus class types.
So when you started, you had the 4 class types.
Mhm.
You started with a studio.
Yes.
Like you had a very specific vision, and I'm very aesthetically driven. And there were things I loved and that I noticed was that like the set was very simple.
Mhm.
It was colored lit walls that were like a 16:9, like the aspect ratio of a screen.
Yes.
And the instructors had like it was quasi 80s aerobic style. Like they're vibrant spandex.
Yep.
They're all
Yep.
beautiful, charismatic
Yes.
people.
Yes.
That was that all your
Yes.
specific vision for it?
Yes. So what we know obviously about consumer brands is that you need to have a really distinctive brand and aesthetic that you bring to market. So at the time we launched in 2018. So a lot of this planning was happening in 2016, 2017. You know, like digital fitness, like no one had really heard of it. Peloton was this big and it was very functional rides. It wasn't what it ultimately became. And so it was obviously a very, very nascent category. And what was cool about that is that we could do sort of like whatever we wanted. And there were no rules in terms of what something had to look and feel like. And so when we built that set, you know, obviously the idea, and we didn't have a lot of space or a lot of money. And so that 16:9 was a really important thing because what 16:9 allows you to do is to create a whole world that takes up the entire screen. And it never felt like you were working out in some like weird room with like plants like that. That's what a lot of influencers end up doing. But yeah, that was a 16:9 piece and why that was so important. And then the other thing that we did was we were really inspired by James Turrell and Dan Flavin, who are 2, you know, incredible contemporary light artists. And they're pretty well known now, but I think at the time, the only inspiration that I had seen taken from that work was like Drake's Hotline Bling video. And so, yeah, what we really wanted to do was to create this like light box that would shift and change color so that, again, it could help you get out of your head and into your body. And I think when you're exercising at home and you're likely exercising in the morning and you're in a dark space, like talk about like a shot of espresso to wake you up. It's like the light just like totally takes over and it does wake you up and it makes you feel good. And there was a lot of like research I did around like light therapy and, you know, what are the right colors to get people excited. And so that's why you see like some sunrises and there's a lot of pink. Yeah. And then the wardrobing was, you know, how do you create contrast so that obviously you can see the body, but it was, you know, also the time period. Instagram was like very color blocky and fun. And so I think that was certainly, you know, that sort of influenced where we went from an overall vibe and, you know, that perspective. And then lastly, coming from the entertainment space, we obviously knew what like good production values looked like. And so with the music and the lighting and the way that we moved cameras and all of that, yeah, that was sort of this really fun exercise in producing and creating intimacy and, you know, to your point, casting instructors that not only were, you know, great technicians of the body and could, you know, come up with great workouts, but also they could make you feel something at home and they could really like help you feel, you know, inspired and encouraged and to keep coming back.
I signed up to Obey on a 2-week free trial I feel like it was end of March, early March 2019. And my plan, I had a 2.5-year-old and I felt awful. And we'd just come back from a trip and I was looking at photos. And I think this often happens to women and moms. And I'm like, that's not my body.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what it's capable of. And that's not how I'm comfortable. And just it was like a blob. I felt like I turned into a blob. And it wasn't the number on the scale. It was a lack of definition from just not doing stuff. So I did this 2-week trial and And that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
You were hooked.
hooked. The part that I thought was so genius was that in my mind, I had done yoga, but half-hour yoga isn't a workout.
Mm-hmm.
It's a stretch
Mm-hmm.
and it's helpful, but it's not a workout.
Mm-hmm.
It does lots of things, but it's not a workout. Going to the gym was never something I enjoyed doing. And it was easy for me to make up excuses to not work out for an hour when I have a baby, I have a company, like
Yep.
life was full. But your workouts were 28 minutes. There's no excuses for 28 minutes. You spend that like looking on your phone doing nothing.
Yeah.
How did you land at that? It's an odd number. I mean, it's an even number, but it's an odd number.
Mm-hmm. So that was very intentional. And a lot of it actually had to do with our production schedule. So, the way that the live production worked, if you remember, is that, in an hour, you would have two different class types and they were alternating between a cardio and a strength. So you could, do both in the same session if you wanted to. There needed to be enough crossover time that the instructor could run off stage, have some water, towel off if they were doing the next class, or transition and bring something else in or someone else in and reset the stage. So that's why we ended up like with these 28-minute classes. There's also, that was sort of like the functional reason that forced it, but there was also a lot of thought that went into like why 28 minutes makes sense. 30 minutes feels like a decent chunk, but like just shaving off 2 minutes is, it just like mentally it makes sense. And what we found through this and then through subsequent experimentation is that when you can get someone to do something for what they perceive as like a relatively short amount of time, you can get them to keep going. And so what we found is like, we thought, oh, people are going to show up for one class, but they actually would stay for both. To your point about getting an hour in. And that little break in between was like just enough for them to catch their breath and then keep going. And it ended up that we started doing, later on in the business, we started doing these like 5-minute classes and 10-minute classes. And what those end up doing, especially for a beginner fitness user, is it gives you some confidence and you feel good. Like the endorphins hit pretty quickly. And so then you stick around and you do more and more. And so one of the things I think we sort of like pioneered in this space was the idea of like an express workout. And what we found also is that like when people would take one express workout, they would oftentimes take two more after.
Right.
And so it's like a sneaky way of getting people to exercise for longer.
It started out as if we call it a network of live shows.
Yep.
Like you were broadcasting live. Was it like 8-10 hours a day?
It was insane. Like at the height, we were 7 days a week, 22 live classes a day.
22.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was like height of COVID. Yeah.
I did an event once here in the kitchen. It was 8 hours live. And I was like toasted. I mean, I was in it. So there's that. But so you had 22 live classes. When you started it, when you founded the company and launched and went live, did you bootstrap that or did you bring on investment?
Yeah, we raised 1.7 in strategic in order to let me just start over. In the beginning of the business, we raised 1.7 in angel. And that was really like going out to like family and friends and, people that we knew. That was a very, very hard round to raise, but we needed that much money in order to basically like stay afloat for the first year, to build the studio, to rent a space, to have a crew that would obviously, that's a lot of people, even though we were pretty lean in terms of like how we actually produce the content, and then pay talent.
So that was your first round of investment.
Yes.
How many years did you do that much live?
Well, in the beginning, I want to say that we did like, maybe it was 5 days a week of live. And the schedule wasn't as like we only did classes in the, in the early day part. We didn't do evening classes yet. But as time went on, as the audience like really gravitated, we found product market fit pretty quickly. And then when COVID hit and all of a sudden people were like at home for, all the hours of the day and had nothing else to do, then there was this like huge demand for evening classes. And then there were, obviously people who lived on the West Coast of the US who wanted like earlier morning classes. And so it just made sense to end up doing many, many more hours. And yeah, that's what we ended up doing. I think we did that until probably 2022 because, things changed obviously in the world when everything opened back up. And people, a lot of people went back to gyms and they were doing kind of like this hybrid approach. And so we didn't need to have quite the same spread that we had previously.
When you opened the business, when you started the business and you took on the investors, What was your objective? Was it to, own and operate the company forever? Was it, in and out in 7 years, 10 years? Like, what was your vision for yourself within the company?
So, obviously when we were pitching investors, there was a need to describe like what an outcome could look like. I don't think in my core though, I cared about the outcome. I really wanted to create this thing. And obviously you want people to do well, especially if they're going to like invest in your business. But yeah, I don't think that I was very outcome driven. For me, I was like looking directly in front of me, which is like, how do we bring this thing to life? And that's the phase of business building that I am obsessed with and I love. And I'm sort of back in that headspace now. And it's so much fun. But yeah, I don't think I ever, and I know a lot of founders are like this. I was never like, oh, I need to sell this business for, X amount of dollars. That was never really like my motivation. My motivation was, what can we create that will really serve this audience and do it really well?
How many rounds of investment did you end up doing in your time
We
there?
did three. So we did a seed round, a pre-seed round, which is the one that I just told you about, the 1.7. Then we raised a little bit of a bigger round for our seed and then our series A. And we raised a series A in June of 21.
Did you love being in the company the entire time you were there? Like, did you love your work day to day?
In the beginning, like, yes, I think as a business gets more mature, it becomes less creative and more hiring, firing, HR, insurance, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not, at least for me, that's not as fun. Like I can do it, certainly, I can do it well, but it's not the like fun creative process that I really, really love.
In that time frame, you also had two additional boys.
I did.
You have three boys.
Yeah.
To me, that's crazy pants.
Mhm.
Like keeping a marriage alive, three humans alive, a business alive, a partnership alive.
Mhm.
You probably have some plants you have to keep alive
Mhm.
too.
Few.
It's a lot to tend to.
Yeah.
What was your day to day like when you had and it was COVID, like, and
Mhm.
you were locked in your apartment
Yeah.
in New York
Yeah.
with all these humans?
It was a lot. So when COVID hit, we had two kids and, I don't know how this happened. Well, I do know how it happened, but we were able to open our studio pretty quickly. So I remember like, I think the shutdown order came on a Wednesday and we had to be closed by Sunday. And then we were open a week and a half later. And so that was kind of miraculous that we were able to do it and no other digital fitness companies were able to. What was great about that is that I could go to the office and I could be like in a contained space and get out of my house with, obviously kids. And my husband at the time was also running a Canadian based production company. And that was like insanity because he started the week COVID began. And so he was trying to like figure out how to run this. And he was doing it from our utility closet with like Raisin Bran behind him and like cleaning supplies. And so, yeah, no, that was really, really wild. I think though, people always ask me like, how do you have all these kids and the dog and all the things, and a husband and a business partner? I thrive in like a chaotic, crazy environment. I think if it isn't like that, I'm sort of bored. Maybe that's like my ADHD brain that like just needs a lot of like stimuli. But I don't know. I had fun. I had a really great time. Again, other than like the HR stuff, I really enjoyed like building that business. And I do think that like because of what happened with COVID, obviously that no one could have expected, I became even more purpose aligned than I was before. Like I knew that I was like intuitively like called to do this and solve this problem. And logically it made zero sense. Everyone's like, why are you leaving this great job at CAA to start this thing? And people thought I was becoming a fitness instructor and like no one like got it and understood. But I just like intuitively knew that's what I needed to do. And then now when I reflect back on it, I think about like how powerful of a platform in a business that we started, obviously not knowing what was going to happen in the world, but like we served so many people in such a material and important way exactly when they needed it. And we had the time in advance to like get ready to do this. And it just, I don't know, it makes me feel so grateful that like I listen to my intuition and I make decisions accordingly because it really had like such major impact. There's so many people that tell me that their fitness journey started with Obey. And a lot of times it's like I was really down and out during COVID and I found this thing and like you brought this joy and this spirit into my life that I really needed and didn't know I needed it. And then I saw it and I just knew that this was the thing. And it started this like, this journey into like the wellness sphere and just like taking care of ourselves every day.
When did you know that the exit was on the horizon? At what point?
Yeah. So we raised, when you raise venture capital, that's the inevitable end.
Yeah.
It's something that I don't think I fully realized and recognized at the time. And so,
what were you raising more money for? Like, what did you need more money to do?
Well, so the business wasn't in the first 2 rounds, it wasn't profitable. Like there were months that it could be profitable, but you remember this is also like the time where there's all these like big venture-backed businesses that are just spending after user acquisition. And so we certainly did that as well. We were pretty measured in the beginning because we didn't raise like a giant round, but
sorry, when you say, so everyone understands, the venture-backed acquisition was to raise lots of money to just pay to bring on users, like for advertising and bring on subscribers.
That's why we raised venture capital, is to grow. Yeah. And so, obviously with COVID, we got a really nice growth spurt. It like 4x the business in days. Like it was really, really wild. And then at a certain point, you have to start spending, marketing dollars in order to create that, continue to create that growth. And that's a really great trajectory when you're on it. But when things get really tricky from a paid marketing perspective, where there's sort of like larger macro issues, it gets very challenging. So we raised, in July of 21. And around that same time, a lot changed. So like the digital paid ecosystem changed. iOS 14 changed a lot. That was like all the privacy implications from Apple. Like, there were so many things that sort of happened that influenced it. But when we raised a $15 million round that was our Series A, and with a really, really high valuation. And it was because, that was where things were valued at the time. But I think that sort of like started the clock on having to exit because we wouldn't be like, the market sort of showed us later on that we wouldn't be able to raise at anywhere near the valuation that we had raised previously. And so, venture capital can kind of like back you into a corner if you're not really careful. And so, but I do, that happened certainly to us. And a couple of years ago, we got sort of an incoming call about a company that was interested in acquiring us. And we went down the path and did the diligence. And, I think once that happened, it just became clear that that was the path that we needed to go down. And again, like that's not the part of the selling piece of it. It feels like selling your child, like something that you have raised and cultivated and you love and you've put like everything and your soul into it. And then you're selling it to someone with the hopes that they're going to be good stewards. And that's a really challenging thing for me, certainly, to wrap my head around.
Yeah, I think we talked about this when we had our preliminary call, and I think it's this sort of misconception that you do need to be quote unquote successful to bring in this venture capital to grow as big as possible. And I feel like so many people, especially those not within sort of that level of entrepreneurship world, don't even realize that even the companies going public at these evaluations, they can still be losing money every single day. Doesn't mean they're profitable, that they're actually earning that. It's that's the money that's been poured into it. And if you can bring investors on at a high valuation, the value of the company is on paper worth more, even if it's not necessarily in the bank account. Is there any part of you that would have just stuck with the 1.7 million and kept it small and intimate and maybe figured out a way to make it profitable without pouring money into acquisition, to just say, okay, we'll work really hard on affiliates, on referrals, and keep it super lean, keep it to 4 types of classes? And was that ever in the plans? No,
I think that we always had really big ideas of where it could go and the number of people that we could reach. And then when COVID hit, people were throwing money at us, and we didn't take money at the time. But I think if I, knowing what I know now, and if I could do it all over again, like, at that time period, I probably should have taken money I should have raised a really big round when COVID hit. like a really giant round and like used that and then sold it a couple of years out. That probably would have been the best business outcome. But, things are
Do you think
other.
you wait?
Mhm.
Do you think you waited too
Yeah.
long to sell it?
Yeah. But it's sort of like what I was saying before. It's the dichotomy of building this business that is so purpose driven and there's so much of yourself in it. That's one idea and way of thinking and way of living. And then there's this other of like financial return. And how do you rectify those two? And what is the right strategy? And that was like a hard thing to, I think that was a hard thing for me to wrap my head around, slash something I don't think I thought a lot about.
Yeah, that's the question. Like that's I think always the question. I didn't realize that my approach to my business was almost the anomaly
Mm.
in building a successful business, but ensuring that it was profitable, that I was investing the net surplus,
Hmm.
not to grow the business and make it as big as possible, but to grow my own life.
Right.
And I've never realized how rare it was. And there's no one really talks about the money side of their business or how it
Right.
affects them personally, especially in the entrepreneurship community. It's so much about, you know, 10xing or making 8 figures or selling for 9 figures or 10 figures. And at the end of the day, the founder doesn't walk away with 11 figures in their business because they sold for, I don't even know what that is,
Yeah.
100 million. Is that where we're at? Maybe, I don't know. But like, is that no one really walks, so very rarely, I should say, it does happen,
Hmm.
but very rarely is that the end game truly of an exit. You
Right.
can have a massive exit, but you know, what do you get to take home at the end of all of it?
Right. I think that a lot of it is also like recognizing and understanding the way that like venture backed companies work. So they don't need all of their businesses to be successful. They only need one to return the fund. And
Yeah.
so if you're that one, then that founder is probably going to do pretty well. If you're not that one, it's part of the VC strategy of like we're going to invest in innovation. There's a lot of these investments that are not going to pay back. They're not going to do well, and then or well enough, but not life changing well. And then you're going to have a Facebook, or you're going to have an Uber, or you're going to have something that like returns the fund in a really material way. And so, yeah, I think it begs the question, and this is something I think that I would think about now. I just don't think I had the business acumen or the understanding to think about this when I started the business. But it's like, are you building a business because this is something that you need to put out into the world that you're super passionate about and that's, again, purposeful and mission aligned? And like, what do you need to do to make that happen? And there are, in some cases, like you need to be venture backed and you just have to sign up knowing that that's the trajectory. And then maybe there's others, like it sounds like in your case, where you didn't have to have venture money. You were really disciplined. The growth at all costs was not kind of the prevailing attitude, and you made it like work for you, which I think that's a super powerful strategy and way of creating something.
I think it was the only way I could do it and sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
Like strength or weakness.
Yeah.
I think that I just wouldn't have the capacity to have like board meetings or have to show someone my financials and explain, why I was having quarterly craft afternoons with my team. Like I just didn't want to have to,
Yeah.
I've never been great at answering to other people or necessarily being a great team player. But I mean, part of me wonders like what could the impact have been had I been willing and daring enough. But at the end of the day, when I started going down the path of acquisition in 2019, I felt like I had someone sorting through my underwear drawer and I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
This isn't going to work
It's
for
not
me.
great in the end. It's not.
No. So
Yeah. A lot of people think that they're like starting, like a lot of people who are founders that I meet, and I think they come to it maybe from a consulting background or like, banking, whatever. They set out to like build a business that they're going to sell. And it's
yeah,
all about the outcome. For me, it wasn't that. And I didn't, that end of the business, I didn't love. Like
I,
it didn't feel intuitive. It didn't feel, it's just a business. It's a
yeah.
transaction and there's a lot of competing interests and feels political.
I know you can't disclose everything that
Hmm.
I'd like to
Hmm.
ask you, but if you can, like, what was the hardest part for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the hardest part was honestly anticipating what the transition was going to look like.
Mm.
And what is my, because Obey was so purpose driven for me, and it's like how I, raised three kids and, did it all while running a business. That's a very strong and powerful force. And so without that thing that I'm working towards, that I'm building, what does my life look like now? And what is my sense of purpose? Obviously, I'm very lucky to have a very like robust life. And it's not that like Obey is my one thing. There's a lot of other things that I have in my life, but I think that really is a struggle. And then thinking also about, the relationships that you build when you're in a partnership like that. And you have employees and we have such an amazing member community. And what happens when I'm no longer the like central fixture, and what does that feel like? And I think one of the things that I really wanted to do in the exit was make sure that the team is set up, make sure that the business is set up to, survive long term and to succeed and grow long term. And then make sure that our members who, I mentioned they like fell in love with movement during COVID and they've fallen in love with this platform. I want to make sure that they continue to have this very meaningful outlet, because there's lots of digital fitness companies now at this point, but I don't think there's anyone who does quite what Obey does.
Hmm. I don't think so either. I mean, I know that I would tell everyone about it. And there, Peloton blew up and then kind of shrunk back down. I remember I had an employee 10 years ago who was obsessed with the Beachbody workouts.
Mhm.
And I tried them and I was like, this is annoying. Like, I can't do this. Um, there is and was, I mean, you're gone, but I'm still there. There is something special. It has definitely changed. And I don't know if I'm aging out of it, or if I don't know if I got older and the instructors got younger, or how that's working out. But it is and was special. And I would imagine that's a difficult, to let go of the wheel and kind of let it fly. It's not on its own. It's under different
Right.
hands. I mean, there's a lot of the same talent and instructors, but I would imagine that's difficult. What was like your first week like? So you exited,
Mhm.
you got your payout, and you were not obligated in the deal to have to say work for it for another 2 years to
Right.
complete. So you signed it, handed over the keys, and that was it.
Well, we were in the fortunate situation to have a competitive process, and there were like a number of different deals that we were looking at. And so
Oh, I
because of
see.
that, I had a bit more freedom in terms of how long I would agree to stay on and what, the conditions of that would be. In the sales process, because it was a really hard and trying time, and there was also things happening with my son, which we can talk about, today or separately. There was like a new purpose that was sort of like percolating and starting within me that I was able to focus some time on, so that
Mhm.
the hard part of the sales process, like I had this like really great positive outlet that I was excited about. And so I think when we sold, I knew that I didn't want to like continue with the business. I knew that I wanted to move on, and I knew in the like directionality wise, like what it is that I wanted to do. And so, and I knew that I needed to like, because at the time I was like running basically like every like business process, everything needed to be transitioned. And so what I agreed to is that for 6 months after we closed the deal, that I would sort of consult and make sure that everything was like properly transitioned, and then I would be completely out. And so that's what I did. The day that we signed, it's always like this, all these big moments, like they're very anticlimactic. And you always remember like the struggle and the hard part, as opposed to these moments that are meant to be magical. But yeah, it sort of like happened. We signed. I couldn't tell anybody because it was, we couldn't let press know until we didn't announce it until June, and we closed the deal in April. And so I think that was the beginning of this transition period. Maybe the second part of it. I think the first part was actually while, the end of Obey was happening. But that liminal space was a very hard one, because it was, how do I spend my days? What am I focused on? If I sit down at my desk, what is it that I'm doing? Like all of the structures that I would normally have of like, okay, you have an all hands meeting that you need to prep for and all of these things, like that stuff didn't exist anymore. And it was like, okay, I don't really have the same structure. And I felt pretty rudderless for that first couple of months. And then we announced in June, and shortly thereafter, I took my kids on a European adventure for a month, which was like unbelievable. But yeah, that first period was really, really very draining and like
Yeah.
which way's up.
We were originally scheduled to talk 4 or 5 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you were not ready. What were you doing? So you're now fully out. Your kids are back in school for the fall. What happened?
Gosh. Okay. So I took my kids on the trip. And then when I was on the trip, actually, someone that I had met years earlier had reached out who had a Gen AI project that they needed a GM for. And they wanted me to join their leadership team, which like I didn't want to jump into, a business in like a leadership capacity. I was really like, I will found something else. And so, I said I would consult. And at the time they were working like with McKinsey's quantum black group or quantum AI group, who's like amazing, really smart, talented engineers. And I had done some AI work at Obey. And I was also like I think probably a very early adopter rather to a lot of the AI tools. And so I was really excited about that. So I agreed to consult for like 3 days a week. It ended up being like 7 and travel and, all of the things. But I did that for Q4. So when I got back from Europe and then through the end of the year. And that was really fun. And, I think that was a really important experience because it got me into like a really big company setting, which I, very quickly remembered that I'm not into. And then, but I also met incredible people that are unbelievable, engineers and physicists. And like, it was super, super cool. So the relationships there were really key. And then what I'm working on now, so there's 2 things. There's a dyslexia curriculum that really helped my son, and that my interest in that, or I guess my exposure to it, happened just like naturally being a parent. And I was trying to help him in Orton Gillingham, which is like the traditional approach they use for dyslexic kids, like just didn't work for him. And I, through a documentary, found someone who was profiled in the documentary. It's called The Truth About Reading on Amazon. I just literally typed dyslexia into, Amazon Prime and found this documentary. I was so moved by it. And I got an introduction to this woman, and I took my son there to see her. And like literally he had 12 hours of total instruction, and he went from a 2nd grade reading level to a 6th grade reading level. And I was like totally blown away by it. And the woman the founder of this program is called EBLI. It's Evidence-Based Literacy Instruction. Her name is Noor Shabazi, and she was a neonatal intensive care nurse who had a daughter with dyslexia. And, her daughter didn't respond to the traditional sort of ways of dealing with it as well. And so she created this method, and she sort of like pulled together a lot of, the scientific research, et cetera. And she like taught her daughter how to read. And so she's been doing it for 20 years. The business is, it's a small, business. And she like really needed my help. And, throughout, like I helped her for a very, very long time doing different things like building GPTs for state applications and, whatever the case may be, like however I could be helpful, which was a really great outlet during the sales process. And she really like has wanted me to come work for her for a long time. And I'm still not ready to like work for someone. Again, I know that I will start something else, but I've been doing that in a part-time capacity. And then there's also this thing on the biotech side in the peptide space, which I'm trying to figure out.
We're all trying to figure out what peptides are.
Yeah.
You inject them, you live forever, everything turns out just fine.
And we all become robots.
They come from somewhere in China, but don't worry, it's all fine. I think that what I've observed in the conversation I've been having with people is that during this liminal phase, most of us are not great at doing nothing. And I also had I'm almost at 3 years now of going to my computer every day because that's what I knew to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, why am I tweaking my homepage again? Like, what is this for?
Yeah.
What I've noticed that people do, and maybe this is the stage you're in, is keep trying things on because it's good to have something to do, and also offers more and more clarity about what you definitely don't want or don't want to do. I also think there's value in taking stillness, which is the hardest part of all of it.
Yeah.
To say, don't need to jump in right now. What is it in my heart's calling. And I'm telling you all this because I have a business for you to start.
All right, let's hear it.
When we had our preliminary chat, we were both talking about crafting, and we discovered we're both really into making things. And you pulled out this beautiful ball of roving from your cabinet. You're like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do with it. I bought it on Etsy. It's beautiful. And I'm like, I feel you. Like my spirit sees your spirit. So I have this idea. So I'm just going to throw it to you because I don't want to do it.
Yeah. These are the best things. I have so many ideas that I give to people all the time. I'm like, you should do it. I can't do it. It's not a scalable business, whatever. You should do it. Let's hear it.
No, this is a scalable business because I think that there are limitations to, I believe moving forward, there's going to be you like leaned forward.
I know, tell me.
I think there's going to be limitations in fulfillment. I'm like hesitant to say it, but in tech-based businesses moving forward.
Okay.
Because our lives are being so saturated with it. And the antidote and how we are going to survive and thrive over the next 10 to 20 years is in buying random balls of roving off Etsy and learning how to use them. So I had this idea of craft studios, like a franchise of yarn studios. And I like yarn because you don't need water. It's not paint. It's not messy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cooking. There's no health and safety issues. Mm-hmm. It's just yarn. Of these pop-up studios that in the, vein of Obey have a very simple, clean aesthetic. And you bring in different instructors and live in person. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're also streamed. But these crafting opportunities, and not like a Domestika, which is, already exists. And I've done a bunch of their courses and they're great. But what I'm seeing is people saying, I want to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I want to go, and not just like on a Saturday afternoon, which is when they all are, because that's when I'm with my family. Mm-hmm. And I think you're seeing these little cafes pop up and like crafting movie nights and all. I think that there's a massive market for this. You buy a membership, you can go to as many crafting workshops as you want, like a Pilates studio. There's only so many spots in each one. And you do punch needle and crochet and weaving, and it's all there.
Yeah, I would love that.
So can you go do that, please?
Maybe. I have to learn how to use the yarn that I have. So maybe if you could teach me how to use it or direct me to some courses so I can learn more about yarn and
I can do that, but I'll also remind you that you started a fitness app without being a fitness instructor.
This is true, but I also think that's one of the learnings, like in terms of like harnessing the learnings and then like really like allowing them to flow through you and help you figure out what you're going to do next. I think having an interest in something is obviously really important and having curiosity, but I do think it's important to also know how to do the thing that you're doing so that you can ensure credibility. So like for instance, the Ability program that I mentioned that I am just so enamored with because they get like it's super efficient. Like the results are incredible, life-changing for kids. I am like training to be an instructor in it, and I'm working with kids and I'm teaching little kids how to read. And it's unbelievably powerful and moving to like see kids make this progress. And I'm also learning so much. Like I am dyslexic. There's a lot that I didn't know about the English language and the code. And like all of a sudden, like my brain is unlocked by like teaching these kids and learning the process. So I do think that if we were to do a yarn studio, and you'd have to do it with me, I'm not going to do it alone. I love a co-founder. Yeah, I would need to know a lot about yarn and crafting and what's the right way to do it. Where do you source it? And what are the things that you can create? There's actually a place that you should check out in New York. It's called Happy Medium. And it started in Chinatown, but it's essentially like an art cafe. So instead of ordering, at a cafe, you would order an appetizer and a drink or whatever. Here you order watercolor, charcoal, and there's like really amazing art that happens here. And this place is packed. It's like not hard to get a reservation, but like you have to make a reservation in advance. They just opened their third studio. I've gone to their studio. Like I went actually a couple of weeks ago and did like this massive scale painting. And it was all, I can't remember the name of the artist, but it was like a turn of the century artist. And it was basically using like acrylic and water. It was awesome. But I do think, to your point, that people need a place to go and have these kind of communal experiences with other people. Because in a world where we're always sitting in front of a computer and it's tech all day long and efficiency all day long, we need a place to create. And, I know that you're similar. So every day I create something. It's almost like, sounds gross. it almost is like going to the bathroom. Like, I don't care if it's awful. I have to do it every single day. Like, it is now a practice in my life in the same way that like working out is I have to create something every single day. And it's probably like, I can show you all the terrible things and I don't care. I don't judge it. I don't care about the outcome. I just care that I'm doing it. And I'm like in that flow, in like that creative state.
Yeah. The joy and the therapy and the healing is in the process.
Yes.
And that is what is going to heal all of our nervous systems, which have been demolished and fried. And almost everyone I know, even, friends who don't consider themselves creatives. One of my best girlfriends is now doing a watercolor every day. I have a friend making jewelry. My sister-in-law started pottery classes. Everyone I know is turning to craft.
Yeah.
And not just craft, but let's call it art, because you're making something from the heart, and that's what it is. I was supposed to come to New York. We talked about this too. I was supposed to come to New York and do a little cooking. I was going to do a little smoothie demo.
I remember
in the box, and I never made that trip. So now I got to come back to New York.
Please. What I can't do we can't do the box, but we can do coffee and cocktails and whatever else. That would be really fun. Yeah.
But I see, you're in this stage and it's the most difficult, and not just for you, because the reflex is to default to what you know.
Right.
And the opportunity and the ridiculous challenge is to question everything that you know and decide what you're taking with you and what you're leaving behind that no longer serves.
Yeah, it's unbelievably powerful. And I think the part where I mentioned, like the first couple of months were really, really tricky. For me, the experience has been in this transitional moment, because I think I'm in the middle or sort of towards the end of that transitional. It's been like really a year. It is like, it was about like shedding the skin. Like, it was the year of this, not dissimilar to what's happening in, in kind of like the new year. And I think for me, 26 is really, it is like, it's a building year. It's a momentum, year. It's learning. It's like all the really fun stuff that I really enjoy. But I think that the part that you're getting at, it's in a moment of transition, you have to stay sort of like shaman ready, right? Like, you have to keep your mind right. You need to do all of the right routines to like make sure that you can channel whatever it is. And I'm not saying this like in a super woo way, but I think for me as a creative, it's certainly the way that it works. It's like, if you can be a clean channel, like the ideas will come. And I was listening to this thing on the Telepathy tape season 2 that just came out. So good. But Rick Rubin and Elizabeth Gilbert, they were talking about ideas needing a host. And like, when the world is ready for an idea, they will find the right host. And in order for you to be the right host, and it will find you, you have to be ready to receive it. And
absolutely,
I think that framing for me has been very helpful. And I feel like in every major transition in my life, whether it was like, making a choice to go to boarding school after my brother died and there was like trauma and chaos in my life, or, making that decision to go into the entertainment space or starting Obey, it's always been like, it's never logical and it never makes sense to anyone else, but it makes sense to me. And the listening to your intuition can be really challenging in a world of like, chaos and tech and notifications and whatever. And I found that this time for me, just like really like rooting and making sure those practices are right and making sure that I'm aligned and I am surrounding myself with the right people who are giving to me in the same way that I'm giving to them, that I think has been what's made all the difference.
Did your relationship with your Obey co-founder survive the exit?
Every relationship, there are like peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
And I love him like he is a sibling, and I always will. When you're not working with someone every day, naturally there's not the same kind of like touch points. I actually just ran into him, and we've talked like businessy stuff, but we haven't really like sat down and like really caught up in a while now. And I don't like, there's no reason for it other than like no one did anything to anyone.
Yeah.
I do think there's part of, because we were like joined at the hip for so long, I think for my healing process, there's needed to be distance so that I can really like metabolize these learnings.
Yeah.
And so, are we as close as we were? No. Do I know him? And does he know me probably better than most people? 1,000%. So no, I have so much love for him in my heart, but no, we're not like chatting all the day, like,
Yeah.
all the time like we used to.
I mean, I suspect, and I like to think I know you really well, but I don't. Like
Yes, you
we've
do.
text. I mean, I do, but we've never like hung out. But I suspect, and also at the stage of life you're in, like we go through this evolutionary period and kind of start asking, like, what is it that I really want to bring to the world? And from my perspective of knowing what you're capable of and your extreme areas of brilliance, you just your ability to read people and that you're trained in that. That's basically what you've been doing your whole adult life. I suspect, and I have some, psychic powers, that what you actually are going to end up doing is nothing what you think. There's something's going to drop in that's a full like, whoa, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got the skills to like, as you said, to be the channel and to get quiet enough and trust it, at least from where I stand and from who I've spoken to on this topic, which is, my greatest privilege is to get to have these conversations. It happens quite quickly after we have them.
Mm. It's all very comic. It's not, well,
Cosmic.
it can be comical, but it is certainly very, very cosmic. I don't know. We'll see. And I think that openness and like not feeling like a decision has to be made
Yeah.
it's part of being ready and excited. And, I think the thing for me is I want to have impact and I want to change the way that we live. And whether that's
Mm-hmm.
exercise, if that's teaching folks how to read in the way that like the brain actually learns, like whatever, if it's crafting as like the ultimate therapy for, you know, integrating like different experiences, it really is about like serving and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that my life matters and the experiences that I've had and the things that have led me here, like there's reasons for them and it improves the lives of everybody else.
Well, so far, so good. Check, check,
Yeah.
check. You're doing it.
Oh, you're the greatest.
Is there anything else you'd like to share that you think would be of value or helpful in any part of, whether it's, you have such a wealth of experience, whether it's building a company with VCs or exiting with grace or, in the transition?
Yeah. So I work with this really amazing, I think of her as like a creative coach. My husband's like, you need no more creativity in your life. You don't need a coach for that. But I have one. And she is also very like AI enabled. And she took me through this visualization and it really, really, has been super helpful. Obviously, like we know how important visualization is. And a lot of times we think about just like creating this picture in your mind. But one of the experiences that she walked through with me, which is very similar to other ways of visualizing, but using an AI tool, is, if you imagine yourself 5 years out, like close your eyes, imagine yourself 5 years out. Who are you? What are your roles? How do you want to feel? What's the setting? And these are just the first things that come to mind. And you build that as a mid-journey prompt. So it's like, imagine and da 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 da. And then the output is unbelievably powerful because when you're saying these things, there's like subconscious stuff that's also coming through that maybe you don't recognize, of symbols and whatever. And I did that exercise and the output was this like watercolor like illustration of me in nature in front of water in a mountain and, a rainbow, like all of these things that have a lot of like symbolic significance. And I have it and I look at it all the time and just say like that isn't the visual that I would have come up with on my own, but it's an unbelievably important one. And it tells me more, it tells me more about my subconscious than it does necessarily about my logical thought of what's next.
Interesting. I believe, I don't remember where I heard it, but that our soul is 5 years ahead of
Mm.
our reality.
Wow, I have not heard that, and I love that.
Yeah, that we are in our, 3D life are just
Mm.
trying to keep up with where our soul is.
Wow.
So it's interesting that you say the 5 years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, I feel like it's in these moments of transition that you become, at least I become, the most spiritual version of myself. I'm just so much more aware. I look to it, I look to find answers internally as opposed to externally. And I don't know, they're really effing hard, but they're such a gift.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
So thank you, Ashley, for all that you shared today. I adore you, and I'm grateful you made the time to be here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for being supportive of this show and the meanderings we're taking with it. Please subscribe at courageouspivot.com and please share, comment wherever you listen to it, or send me a note. Always appreciated. And most of all, I want you to share this episode with a friend who you think could really benefit from hearing the wisdom of Ashley today. Thank you as always for being here, and I will catch you again next week. Have a great rest of your day.